It's Friday, September 5th, 2025. Fridays are Ask or Tell Me Anything, and a Friday 5-pack including one of the most nihilistic moments in politics I've ever seen. That's next on the AM Update. Well, thank you for riding along for another week on the AM Update with me. I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. As always, even if you've already done it before, could you give me a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice? That is greatly appreciated. Also, I want to remind you, for everybody who is an Apple podcast listener, if you're sick of the programmatic ads, you can always purchase a premium subscription, just $5 a month, and you'll wipe out all of those ads. All of them. $5 a month. I think it's well worth your money to get rid of those ads if you're listening on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever they're calling that these days. Well, we've got a Friday 5-pack for you. And yesterday, of course, the big talk on social media and elsewhere throughout the news media was HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy's testimony in front of the Senate Finance Committee. That was just one of the most contentious hearings probably of the year so far, as various senators, both Republicans and Democrats, tried to corner RFK Jr. on the changes he's making with federal public health policy, starting with the CDC and the good turmoil, in my estimation, that's going on over there. Now, we could spend the entire morning just reacting to clips from this hearing as RFK Jr. repeatedly just called these individuals liars to their faces. There was, I think it was Ron Wyden, the senator. RFK Jr. just looked at him and said, "You've been here for 25 years. And look at our health and how it has deteriorated. It's deteriorated on your watch, just moments like that galore." However, there was one exchange. I've seen cynical, and that's the middle name of 95% of the people in politics in Washington, D.C. Their middle name is cynical. I've seen that as many times as the day is long in politics, just cynical ploys here and there. I've never seen a moment, I don't think, quite as nihilistic as what unfolded between Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy and RFK Jr. Bill Cassidy is a Republican. Keep that in mind as you listen to this clip. He is a Republican. And he is trying to pit his Republican president against his Republican president's pick to lead HHS, RFK Jr. This is one of the most this goes beyond cynicism. This is just straight up nihilism from Senator Bill Cassidy. Listen to this.
That the COVID vaccine killed more people than COVID.
Wait,
that was a statement.
I did not say that.
Okay, then let me ask, because you also
Senator, I just want to make clear, I did not say that.
We'll check the record. That's a question of fact. You also said that you were also, as lead attorney for the Children's Health Defense, you engaged in multiple lawsuits attempting to restrict access to the COVID vaccine. Again, it surprises me that you think so highly of Operation Warp Speed when, as an attorney, you attempted to restrict access. But let me ask.
I'm happy to explain why.
I had 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. It also surprises me because you've canceled, or HHS did, but apparently under your direction, $500 million in contracts using the mRNA vaccine platform that was critical to Operation Warp Speed. Again, an accomplishment that I think President Trump should get a Nobel Prize for. You canceled $500 million in contracts. Now, I grew up in a middle-class family, so $500 million seems, just to cancel, it seems like an incredible waste of money. But it also seems like a commentary upon what the president was attempting, what the president did in Operation Warp Speed, which is to create a platform by which to create vaccines. So this just seems inconsistent that you would agree with me the president deserves a tremendous amount of credit for this.
Is this a question, Senator Cassidy, or is this a speech that you don't want me to answer? Because I want to answer that question.
Please.
If it's a question.
But be tight, please.
First of all, the reason that Operation Warp Speed was genius is it did something nobody had ever been done. I don't think any president but President Trump could do it. It got the vaccine to market that was perfectly matched to the virus at that time when it was badly needed. because there was low natural immunity and there were people getting very badly injured by COVID. But it was also brought in therapeutics like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and protocols for treatments, and there were no mandates. And then
Okay, I have another question, so please, about 15
that's when I
seconds.
began litigating against President Biden's mandates. Now,
So that is the exchange between Louisiana Republican Senator Bill Cassidy and RFK Jr. Now, you may be wondering, what's so bad about that? Guys, you see what RFK Jr. is having to deal with there. Bill Cassidy, this snake, is trying to pit RFK Jr.'s boss, the President of the United States, and RFK Jr. against each other. Hey, you believe Operation Warp Speed? Do you believe President Trump deserves a medal or the Nobel Prize for that? And of course, RFK Jr., what else is he going to say? Yes. And that was before that clip actually happened. Well, you've also said this about Operation Warp Speed. See, Bill Cassidy knows that President Trump is still very proud of Operation Warp Speed. Now, there's some cracks in that foundation we talked about earlier this week, I believe. But Bill Cassidy knows this is one of President Trump's big accomplishments or big pride points. Bill Cassidy also knows what RFK Jr. really thinks about the gist of Operation Warp Speed. And so he's trying to play them against each other. You know, Bill Cassidy has been on the ground floor of trying to knife RFK Jr. every step of the way. Every step of the way. The reason I say this goes beyond cynicism into straight up nihilism is because Bill Cassidy is not from the state of Louisiana. And it's become patently obvious he hails from the state of Big Pharma. Our Big Pharma is what the lower third on the television should say. He's not from Louisiana. All of those senators screeching to RFK Jr. yesterday, they are not from any of their respective states. They're not. That's why I say it's just nihilistic. Because there's absolutely devoid of any concern for what RFK Jr. is trying to accomplish here for the American people. It's all just special interests. Now, I'm trying not to get cynical myself. But like I said, that went beyond cynical, straight up into nihilism. One of the worst moments I've seen in politics this year. Of course, that prompted this absolute truth bomb off the top rope from Vice President J.D. Vance, who posted on social media during the proceedings during that hearing yesterday, a testimony from RFK Jr., quote, "When I see all these senators trying to lecture and gotcha Bobby Kennedy today, all I can think of is, you all support off-label, untested, irreversible hormonal therapies for children," therapies in air quotes, "mutilating our kids and enriching Big Pharma. You're full of," and everybody knows it. Only J.D. Vance didn't type. I censored that for him. Wonderful, wonderful messaging from our vice president. Let's move on here. We're already deep into a Friday five pack. The Department of Justice is considering blocking those identifying as so-called transgender from buying firearms after a so-called trans-identifying male opened fire on children last week in Minnesota and killed 2. Of course, that is it's not just that. It's the Covenant school shooting. I think I saw, if you take away accidental discharges and gang-related incidents, since 2023, half of all school shootings took place at the hand of so-called transgenders. So the Department of Justice trying to get ahead of that. I've seen Mary Margaret Olohan over at the Daily Caller. I think she's with the Daily Caller. Maybe she was she's with the Daily Wire now. And she is reporting, her sources are saying that this is going to be specifically targeted at trannies. They're not messing around with any sort of finagling semantics, gender dysphoria, things of that nature. So they've got to be careful here, but I do believe they are going to take some action. I think to try to make it illegal for those who think they are the opposite sex and demand everyone believe the same from acquiring and purchasing firearms. FBI Director Kash Patel posted this. This is the second time I've seen in the last couple of weeks that FBI has actually stopped a would-be mass shooting or mass violence before it could actually happen. In this instance, here is what FBI Director Patel said on social media, quote, "The incredible work of this FBI stopped a potential school shooting. After the suspect was released on bond, we moved quickly to arrest him and secured federal charges to keep him detained and our children safe. Quick action and phenomenal intelligence work saved lives and kept families whole." So this is in response to a North Carolina man being charged with making online threats to massacre dozens of black children, but the FBI nabbed him before he could take action. We've also got to talk about this week. Here is an exchange between Senator Tim Kaine and Senator Ted Cruz on the issue of where our rights come from.
The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling.
So Senator Kaine said in this hearing that he found it a radical and dangerous notion that you would say our rights came from God and not from government. I just walked into the hearing as he was saying that, and I almost fell out of my chair. Because that radical and dangerous notion, in his words, is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. And if you do not believe me, and you made reference to this, Mr. Barnes, then you can believe perhaps the most prominent Virginian to ever serve, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator, not by government, not by the Democratic National Committee, but by God."
So there is that exchange between Senators Ted Cruz and Senator Tim Kaine, I believe of Virginia. You know, Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's running mate back in 2016. That seems like forever ago. The absolute irony of Tim Kaine claiming what he said there, that we're just like the Iranian regime to claim that our rights are self-evident, that they come from our creator and not the government. The irony of saying that while he is the minority, he's in the minority party in a trifecta in Washington, D.C. Does he not understand? If he really believed that, wouldn't he be tiptoeing and walking on eggshells a little bit there? If he really believed that. Of course he's wrong. And I would expect my audience to know the reasons why he is wrong. If the government gives your rights, the government can take those rights away, too. Oh, I think he knows that as well. He doesn't want to talk about that either. No, the government's job is to safeguard those rights. That's the God-ordained role of government, to punish the evildoer who tries to deprive you of your rights that already pre-exist any given government or any given law. So, a real mask-off moment there. And finally, fifth in our Friday 5-pack, a little bit on a lighter note, comedian and podcast host Theo Von invited a random Amish kid on his podcast this week. Theo Von, with a random Amish kid, interviewed this random Amish kid about the topic of ADD and the Amish community.
Do they have ADD in the Amish community?
So, I don't even, do you know what is ADD? I'm not even quite sure.
Oh, wow. ADD, it's like, let me think. You ever have that feeling like when somebody's tickling you or whatever, kind of?
Yeah.
And you're like, you just can't even handle it?
Yeah.
It's like that feeling, but it's like in your brain, kind of, when you're trying to pay attention.
Oh.
So it's like your paying attention doesn't work, you know?
Oh. No, I don't think anyone has ADD that I know of. I hope not, because that would be too fun to have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's like, you get to change your mind without even doing it, you know?
So if you drive a car, if you have ADD, so can you focus on the road, or you're like looking over to the ditch and then this car and the guy in the passenger seat? Or?
I think it gets a little bit testy for some people, like it's too much, you know? Yeah, pull that up. Do the Amish have ADD? Pull that up. Let's get a gander at that. That's a great question.
Yeah. I've never heard of ADD before.
Then you must not have it, brother.
Yeah.
The Amish do experience ADD, but reported rates are noticeably lower than in the general population, and diagnosis practices may differ significantly due to cultural and lifestyle factors. Wow, that's pretty fascinating.
That is so bizarre. This random Amish kid being interviewed by Theo Vaughn. Hey, do you have ADD in the Amish community? I don't know what prompted Theo Vaughn to ask that question. But it's kind of like, you remember that meme going around during 2020? That the Amish community expressed a lower rate of COVID and lower rates of stress? That's because they didn't have the TV? Well, of course they don't have as much ADD. They don't know what it is. And they're also outside a lot more and probably read a lot more as well. When we come back, it'll be another edition of Ask or Tell Me Anything. That's coming up next. I talked about this, I think, on AM Update a few weeks ago. This is the least amount of anticipation going into a football season, both college and NFL, that I've had in quite a while. I chalk that up to it's really hard to follow college football now because all the players are moving all the time. Although it seems like there's news this week, they're going to tamp down on that, just create one transfer portal window in January every year so that players can't move twice a year, which was happening every single year. But with all of that being said, it's not because I was dreading watching my Hawkeyes or my Chiefs. It's just, I just didn't have as much interest for whatever reason. I will tell you though, last weekend, especially Thursday and Friday night, I really enjoyed watching some college football. That was a lot of fun. And I'm glad football season, after all, is here, even though I'm not nearly as invested as I was in it in recent years. Let's go to Ask or Tell Me Anything. Ask me any news story you want. No, ask me any question you want. Tell me any news story you think needs covered on the AM Update. Let's go back to Jim, always keeping us apprised of what's going on in his home state of Michigan. Headline from the Midwesterner: Saginaw councilwoman convicted of election fraud only gets probation and stays in office. A sitting member of the Saginaw City Council has been convicted of election fraud, yet she remains in her seat and will avoid any jail time. In June, Councilwoman Monique Lamar Sylvia was found guilty of conspiracy, election forgery, and signing multiple false names on a nominating petition. On August 27th, Saginaw County judge sentenced her to a mere 1 year probation, 140 hours of community service, and court fees. Despite the conviction, Lamar Sylvia has not resigned. Other council members have urged that her seat be vacated, but as of last Friday, she remains on. How can that even happen? How is that even possible? You committed election fraud, and you get to stay in your elected position? That's just bass-ackwards. Just bass-ackwards. All right, let's go to this. James says, I'm guessing it'll be very advantageous in the midterms for conservatives, MAGA, Republicans to run on Democrats hate Trump, by extension us, more than they want to protect you. Yeah. So track with me here a little bit. Muriel Bowser, the Marxist mayor of Washington, D.C., talked tough. Trump can't send the National Guard into here. We're going to oppose him. We're going to resist him. And then, randomly this week, executive order, all law enforcement in my city, here, Washington, D.C., must not only comply with federal law enforcement, they must help them indefinitely. Thank you, come again. Just randomly. She just did an about-face randomly. Why is that? Because they were getting pulverized on this in Washington, D.C. I guarantee you, if Donald Trump goes into Chicago against the will of Brandon Johnson, the same thing will happen in 2 weeks. This is the risk-reward ratio that I was talking about a month and a half ago. We even had a poll of the week regarding whether or not Trump should go into other blue cities. See, the risk that President Trump is running is that you're rewarding these cities for electing absolute trash nonsense as their leaders by doing their jobs for them when they frankly don't deserve that level of protection. They don't. They voted for the people who put into place policies that made crime such a nuisance that it is and a threat that it is in these cities. And so you're bailing out these people. Yet at the same time, if you crack down on crime so effectively that all of these citizens of all of these cities see a marked improvement and a dramatic and short-term improvement, in the short term, it doesn't take very long, they're also going to start thinking, wait, we could have done this the entire time? What the heck what are we doing here? And you've seen that risk has already paid off, I think, in Washington, D.C. So, to get back to James's assertion, advantageous in the midterms for conservatives to run on Democrats hate Trump, by extension us, more than they want to protect you. Yeah, you're already seeing that in effect. That's already taking place. David Axelrod was out there pleading with Democrats, please get off of this issue. Let him do what he wants. Let Trump do what he wants. You're getting killed here. We'll see how calcified they are against Trump. Light in the Dark says, what do you think caused the flip from the early 2000s to now, when loving your country and showing patriotism went from being normal and questioning it meant you might be a foreign asset, to now where showing patriotism gets you branded as a terrorist? Barack Obama is what changed that. Barack Obama is what changed that. That is the line of demarcation. Now, this was ripe territory. He arrived in the aftermath of the war on terror. We still hadn't gotten we still hadn't gotten Osama bin Laden after years in Afghanistan. The official narrative is that no weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq. And so already you had kind of the jingoistic wing of America. They were already kind of downtrodden. And here comes Barack Obama. And there's a great piece at Tablet Magazine. I brought this up on numerous occasions, and I will continue to do so. It's called Rapid Onset Political Enlightenment. And it just details how Barack Obama succeeded in remaking the Democrat Party, half of the country, in his own image. Basically, mentally, academically, intellectually, spiritually, one-shotting nearly half the country into just completely being useful idiots. I mean, he's a Marxist, and that's a Marxist term. They are useful idiots. They will just do and say and regurgitate whatever they are told. So the answer to your question, Light in the Dark, is Barack Obama. That's what changed. That's what changed. His goal was to fundamentally reshape the United States of America, and he was successful in a lot of ways, although his legacy now is on its last legs. Cole asks, what book is Ben hooked on? We read Llama Llama Red Pajama, Wacky Wednesday, and There's a Monster at the end of this book, Into the Ground. Have you been caught speeding up the bedtime routine by skipping pages yet? Oh yeah, especially if it's a longer book. There's a version of Alice in Wonderland, and it's, I think maybe shorter than the original book or whatever that was. I have to skip pages. Ben kind of likes that every now and then. Now, Ben's grandma, my mom, the last 2 years for his birthday, has put together his own book. And it's like a storybook, kind of in the same vein of Almanzo, Laura Ingalls Wilder. There's some children's books along those, and it's very much that same cadence and kind of that same feel. And so that's what we've been hooked on recently, are these custom books that my mom, Ben's grandma, has put together, just detailing when Ben goes down to the farm, what they do, the things that they have fun with, and all the activities that they do down there. Ben loves those books. All right, when we come back, one final segment this week on the AM Update. Why is Trump wasting all of his political capital on the Epstein story? Got a question about that and other matters. I'm not sure he is wasting his capital anymore. That's coming up next. Rhino says, why is Trump destroying his remaining credibility over the Epstein files? Is he? I mean, there's a lot of people destroying their credibility over these things. I've never heard of a panel of Epstein victims until this week. I thought he was destroying his credibility as well, But then when the people who are trying to do, like, I love Thomas Massey, but the people trying to do the gotchas with Trump over the Epstein thing just kind of made a fool out of themselves this week. I'm sure on some level they do care about the actual victims. Maybe those were actual victims this week that did that press conference. This whole story is just, I'm done with it for now. Until I see people getting perp walked, if that's even necessary, I would assume it is. Ghislaine Maxwell, as you've heard it said before, didn't traffic to nobody. But it's just mind-boggling. Country Squire has this. This is so stupid. The Westboro Baptist Church, famous for protesting at soldiers' funerals, will protest at comedian Nate Bargatze's show. Yeah, I have not heard that name for a long time. I think Fred Phelps died about a decade ago. But Westboro Baptist Church up to their old shenanigans again. Of all the people to picket outside of, Nate Bargatze would be basically at the bottom of the list. But I think that's their point. You know, if I didn't know better for the better part of the maybe zenith of Westboro Baptist Church's, I don't know, time in the spotlight, what have you, I would have thought that they were maybe a USAID thing. Just a total astroturfed organization to make every single Christian look like nut jobs. But they're back, apparently. D.R. Griffin with a very, very important question. What do you think of the terms sitting Indian style versus crisscross applesauce? You should never, ever, ever call it Indian style. Never, ever. It's cultural appropriation. Do we even know if Indians sit crisscross applesauce? Do we even know that for sure? That's just a harmful and, dare I say, hateful stereotype of our brothers in India and sisters in India. So never call it Indian style. By the way, speaking of India, did you see all of those huge right-wing accounts? I only saw 2, but I saw people saying there were multiple. I saw it was Election Wizard and Defiant L's, 2 major right-wing X accounts. They were posting pro-Indian propaganda in response to Trump's tariffs against India. Did you see that yesterday? I did. Election Wizard and Defiant L's came out in support of India. All right, one more on this. Actually, there's actually more. Redacted says, regarding your segment on Tucker, I too listen to him depending on interviews and or topic. I don't listen to the Hitler folks. The Lee Strobel one was fantastic, and I plan on listening to Michael Knowles as well. The one he did just prior to Strobel about SSRIs is a must-listen or watch to anyone who's on, ever taken, or a friend or family member on any of these psychiatric drugs. It's an interview with a psychiatrist named Dr. Joseph Witt-During. It's one of the best interviews I've heard, and certainly the only one I've ever heard on this topic. Redacted said, I was on SSRIs for just over 20 years. The side effects the doctors don't tell you about, the experiences, and most importantly, weaning off of them needs to have mainstream coverage, but I don't know it will get it. Several years later, I'm still dealing with the effects. I had 5 different doctors at different locations that just continued to fill it out without a care in the world and no real warnings, even while pregnant, because it was considered at the time to be category C, aka they had no idea, so it was up to the physician. My college roommate got diagnosed with bipolar after she was on them. I now have panic attacks after quitting them. If you cold turkey off of them, you'll be convinced you need them for life, all of which he discussed, begging people to listen to this one. These things are evil and worse than some of the most hardcore illegal drugs you can imagine. I self-weaned off of them after an 8-month period extremely slowly, although my doctor disagreed and thought I should just stay on them forever, because what's the harm? Redacted said, I no longer have that doctor. And P.S. Maybe this is one to address on Ask Izzy. I know, and that is good. I'll flag this to Bella. I'll send this to her right now. I know that Bella, in some limited circumstances, thinks SSRIs are okay, and very, very narrow and limited. But she'll tell you they're vastly, vastly, vastly overprescribed. So Redacted, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm sorry that was the road that you were burdened with. Tiny Johnny says, what do you think has been the story so far this year that was the quickest to be pushed under the rug? There was one. Oh, it was the Republicans. The Republicans trying to push for amnesty, and that's been a couple of things, but just complete hacks, complete backstabbers, and I would expect nothing less from the Republican Party. And this was, I think, in the immediate aftermath of the big beautiful bill. There were a group of Republicans saying, "Hey, we need amnesty. If you've been here for longer than 10 years or whatever, you can stay." Whatever it was, that was quickly swept under the rug, and I hope that's because of pushback from us out here in the cheap seats. All right, a couple more questions. Trumpet Tiger says, have you and Bella ever thought about doing a study on John Eldridge's books for No Suck Saturday? I think we considered one of them, and I think we'll consider again because we're quickly approaching the end of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, so we'll definitely consider that. And finally, this from Don't Drone Me, Bro. How many hours do you put in per week on the day job? How many on the AM update? What percentage of your income comes from the day job versus AM update? And I responded, actually, because when I heard that question, I'm like, this is either going to be a compliment or he's setting me up here. And so I asked him, this sounds like a setup. And he said, nope. Just genuinely curious. I like the AM update, and it has improved since I started tuning in sometime last year. I'm just wondering how you have time to squeeze it all in. Seems like a lot. Not sure how many questions you get. I figured you could take a few minutes to answer if you wanted to. Well, sure. I'll answer them. How many hours do I work on the day job? Well, it's an interesting job because the news is always happening, so you're always kind of on. So I'm not trying to hedge or anything like that. But in terms of hours of the day when I'm actually actively working, focused on nothing else, focused, undivided focus, it can be an 8 to 4, 9 to 5 type of job, or even just because of the way broadcasting works, even less on like a Friday, because you don't, at least with our gig, we don't have something to do on Saturday in terms of a show to prepare for, so I can get out a little bit earlier. So it's not terrible hours, but you are kind of always on. You kind of keep up with the news. In terms of this, it's about an hour and a half. It used to take me a lot longer, but now that I've got kind of the streamlined process down, I mean, I have a document that I produce every single day with a rundown, so it is very structured. You'll hear, top, category A news at the very top, then politics and government and other important news in the kind of the second, 3 to 5 minutes in. And then after the break, that'll be international news or national interest news, things that people around the country might be interested in, but it's not, it's not A-list news. And then a long-term or long-form story, that's the penultimate thing that I do every single day. And then I have my air analysis at the end of the show every single day. And I do that in that order on purpose. Again, I see this as a service. I'm trying to inform people, put a little spin, try to make it somewhat entertaining, even for my personality, try to make it somewhat entertaining, but I try to keep my opinions to the very end because I want you to come here for information and not just personality and opinions. There's a million places where you can get that. So to answer your other questions as well, so how much of my income do I earn from the day job versus the AM update? Well, I have other side hustles as well. They're all media related. I've got a couple of sports related podcasts that I work on that I either co-host or produce. And so that's, that produces some income as well. But in terms of income, it's about 10 to 1 day job to this podcast. So it's significant enough for me to keep doing it. And just because I think it's fun and I think it's important for me to keep honing whatever skills I'm honing here. But it seems like a lot, you said. It is. Now that football season is here, the sports podcasts are in full gear. So when you account for the pieces of content that I create, so standalone pieces of content that I create for the day job, this and the sports podcast, that's 10 for that's 14 for the day job every week. That is 7 for this every single week. So that's 21. And then there's 3 different pieces of content, standalone pieces of content. So 24, I'm doing like 24 episodes every single week. That's a lot. It is a lot. So really, especially this time of year, I gotta stay organized and stay disciplined every single day. That's going to do it. Thank you for that question, by the way, and I appreciate your compliments as well. Don't drone me. That's going to do it for Friday. Thank you again for listening. Back again tomorrow for No Suck Saturday. Week in review on Sunday. Back again regular order on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend.